number in standard form. So the very first thing we got to remember is there's a negative up under the radical, so we've got to pull it out. And to do so, when we do that, it becomes I. So now we have I, the square root of 144. So now we look at the 144. Now if we don't know if that is a perfect square or whatever, remember you can always go to your Desmos calculator when it says calculator active, which that is, and we can take and put it up under a radical. So we say square root of 144. And if it is an even number, as this is, okay, this is an even number here, then we know that it's a perfect square. So when we have a perfect square, we only write that number once, which was 12. And don't forget, the I comes down with it. So our answer is 12I. Now looking at number 2, we have 3 minus the square root of negative 125. Again, we've got to take and get that negative out from under our radical. So then that's going to give us 3 minus I square root of 125. Now looking at that 125, do we think that is a perfect square or not? Like I said, if you don't know, then use your Desmos, because this one's not asking you to do a factor tree. So you're going to put the square root of 125. Now remember, if it's a perfect square, it's going to be an even number. Well, look, this is 11.18, blah, 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 blah. So you know that that's not a perfect square. But we've also talked how we can use Desmos to give us a factor tree by putting it as 125 divided by x to the square. That is the same as the square root of 125, but when we put it in that form, we can use our table by going up there, hitting that gear, and then hitting our table. And then we want to come down here. They usually go to 2. We're going to highlight that 2, and we're going to hit enter a couple of times. And we want to stop when we come to it where it's keep repeating with decimals, and we want to go back up to the last whole number in the x and the y. So you got to have a complete whole number in both, no decimals. So we're going to go up here, and it is at 5, because 5 is in the x and 5 is in the y. So then we can go out. We know that x goes on the outside of the house, and 5 stays in the house. So we're going to have 3 minus 5I square root of 5. And that is your answer. That is the simplest form you can do. Now looking at number 3. Number 3 says that we have to do a factor tree. Now to get credit for this, you have to do both. You have to give me the simplified answer, plus you've got to do the factor tree. So when we do this, you're going to pull out that negative again, and you're going to have I, the square root of 20. So now let's do 20 with that factor tree. Now you can do 20 on the factor tree. You could do 4 and 5. You can do 2 and 10. It doesn't matter as long as you can go ahead and break down the other side. So let's go ahead and do 4 and 5 first. I'll show you that one first. And then the 5 is a prime number. We can't break it down anymore, but the 4 we can. We can say 2 times 2. Now remember, for it to go outside of that radical or outside of the house, it has to have a buddy. Well, the 2 has a buddy because there's 2 2's there. So that would go out with the I. So it gets to play with the I. So we have 2I, the square root. The 5 is by itself, so it has to stay under the radical. So that would be your answer, and that would be your factor tree. Well, I told you that factor tree can be done more than one way. So let's look at doing it the other way. We could say 20, and we can say 2 times 10, and then 2 is a prime number, but we can still break down that 10, so we can say 2 times 5. Remember, we still have to have a buddy system. So these 2 2's are a buddy. They get to go out, but the 5 is by itself still, so it stays in. So whether you did the one tree or the other tree, you would get the same answer. All right, 4, 5, and 6 says to plot the complex number. And remember, when you plot the complex number, all you're having is 1 point, okay? We're not talking about the vector here. We're just plotting the complex number. So you have 1 minus 3i. Remember, 1 is your real, and the negative 3i is your imaginary. So 1 is on the x-axis, and the negative 3i is on your y-axis. So we would go over to our 1 on our real axis, and we would go down because it's negative 3i to the 3, and there would be your point. Hold on, my pen went out. There we go. And there would be your point right there. Looking at number 5, you have a negative 3i. You don't have an a here, so that means a is 0. So that means you would start at the origin, and then this is a negative 3i, so we are going down, and it would be right on our imaginary axis, or our y-axis. Then you have, on number 6, a negative 3 plus 2i. So again, our real is negative 3, so we go over to the negative 3, and we're going to go up to the 2i because it is positive. And so there would be our point. Now that is just plotting complex numbers. Now if you look at 7, 8, and 9, remember this is saying plot the vector of the complex number. Now remember, a vector, when you're plotting a vector, you're going to have a line segment, but on that line segment, you're going to have the initial point and the terminal point. The terminal point is where it goes to the complex number. The initial point starts at the origin. So let's go ahead and graph 7. You got 1 plus 5i. 1 is your real number, and then 5i is your imaginary. So we're going to go up, and it's going to be plotted here. Now we are not done because we have to draw it as a vector. We go to the origin, and we start our vector line, and we stop at our terminal point right at our complex number. Looking at number 8, it is at 8i. So at 8i, you are going to take and do our complex number. And so when we do that, we're going to go up here, and it is going to be right on our point there. I think my pen has stopped working. Okay, I got it back on the charger here. And so we would be at 8i here. And then we want to draw it as our vector. So you would start at the origin, and then you would draw up, and you would put your arrow right at your complex number. Now number 9, we have a negative 4 for our a, and a negative 5i for our imaginary. So you're going to go over to negative 4 on the real line, and then you're going down to the negative 5. Now remember, we are going to be drawing a vector, and so we're going to start at the origin, and we're going to go all the way to the complex number, and we're going to draw our arrow tip, and that is our terminal. So that is what your vectors look like for those complex numbers. And number 10, we want to make sure we remember that we are going to do the imaginary part and the real part. And it asks us what the imaginary part is. The imaginary part obviously has the I with it. But you also have to have the sign in front of it. So that would be a negative 10i. And then the real part is just a A. The A is a positive 9 here. Okay, guys, make sure you make the corrections to that quiz, turn it back into the sub, and then get the other quiz and do the second attempt and turn that in also. If you have any questions or whatever, I will be back tomorrow. Make sure that you get your work done for class, and have a happy day.